Hi guys, we're working on the last page of Unit 5, Section 1, Solving Quadratic Equations. So examples 21 through 28. So this page I can solve by using any method I would like. So when I have something like this, it's already equal to 0. So I'll go ahead and solve by factoring. And the way I'm going to do that is by starting out and pulling the GCF out. So when I look at x squared and for x, I can pull x out. So x squared divided by x, I get x. For x divided by x, I get 4. Now I have both factors. X is a factor, x plus 4 is a factor. Now I set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x is a factor, set it equal to 0, done. Now x plus 4 is a factor, set it equal to 0 and solve. So minus 4 on both sides. So x equals -4 and x equals 0. Here are your two answers. On 22, I don't have it equal to 0, but let's see what we can do. I can set it equal to 0. So if I minus 3 on both sides here, I get x squared plus 8. I can't factor that. So we're going to have to try something different. If I have x squared plus 11, so if I minus 11 on both sides, if I have a number here and just simply x squared here, I can solve it by taking the square root. And that's what I'm going to do. So minus 11 on both sides, that will give me x squared equals -8. Now at this point, when I take the square root of both sides, remember there's a plus or minus here, and then these guys will simplify. I have x equals plus or minus square root of -8. Because we're taking the square root of a negative number, you know I'll have an imaginary solution. Now, I need to be able to simplify square root of 8. Square root of 8 can be written as square root of 4 times square root of 2, because 4 times 2 equals 8. And I chose 4 because 4 is a perfect square, and I can simplify that by taking the square root of 4, and then I get 2. So this square root of 8 can be simplified down to 2 square root of 2. But remember, because I'm taking the square root of a negative number here, that will be imaginary. So bring it all together. So x equals plus or minus 2i, because of the imaginary right there, square root of 2. You don't have to write this as two answers, but you need to know that these are two separate answers. One where x is positive 2i square root of 2, and the other one is negative 2i square root of 2. Okay, that's what it means. 23. So I can try to set this equal to 0. So if I minus 2 on both sides, then I get 5x squared equals 30. Do you want to try to do that? So let's try that. Minus 2 on both sides, so I can set this equal to 0. So 5x squared plus 30 equals 0. This is not the only way to solve 23. You can always go back and use the quadratic formula. So now I can factor the greatest common factor right there, which is 5. So 5, I have x squared plus 6 equals 0. I'm stuck there. So the factoring didn't go well. So we're going to start over. And this is going to happen to you. And I just let you go on purpose. So let's start over. Because they don't come with a label like, hey, do this way, do this that way. You will have to know which way will work or not. You try, and if it doesn't work out, try something else, like we did here. So the setting this up equal to 0 didn't work out. So I'm going to try to split that by minus 32 on both sides. So here I have negative 30. Okay, so if I divide by 5, I have x squared equals negative 6. Okay, and at this point, we're very similar to where we were from example 22. I can just do the square root. Remember that it's always plus or minus, and because I'm taking the square root of a negative number, that will lead me to an imaginary solution. So plus or minus, when I take the square root of a negative number, I have an imaginary solution. So, and I cannot simplify square root of 6, so you're just going to leave it like that. Okay, so I like 23. I didn't trick you, even though you might think that. But this is going to happen when you're taking your exam, when you're taking your midterm, that you won't know from the get-go which way to solve. So you try one, and if that doesn't work, you try something else. 24. So I don't know. I just want to divide by 7. Divide by 7. I get 9. Okay. The only thing I have on this side is the term containing the square. So square root on both sides. This one was easy to make that decision. So x minus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 9. Square root of 9 is 3. Now what do? Well, I have x minus 2 equals positive 3, x minus 2 equal negative 3. So we're going to open that up. And you're going to solve both because one equal positive 3, one is negative 3. So add 2 to both sides. Here I have 5. Add 2 to both sides, negative 1. That one, not a lot of thinking there, not a lot of choices to make. This one is equal to 0. But for some reason, when I look at 25 and 24, they're very similar. I almost want to get rid of that 7 and then divide by 6. So let's do that. So minus 7 divide by 6. Don't think that you did something wrong or that this method is not going to work. That just means your answer will be something not pretty. It will be a fraction, it's going to be imaginary, but don't worry, everything will be okay. So from here, take the square root of both sides. When you're taking the square root of a negative number, that means your solution will be imaginary. So you have x minus 3 equals plus or minus square root of negative 7 over 6. I should have gone all the way down. Okay. So now I need to add 3 to both sides. I'm going to continue right here. So add 3 to both sides. I have x equals 3 plus or minus square root of negative 7 over 6. But I cannot leave the radical in the denominator. So you have 3 plus or minus. Let's deal with that negative. So the square root of a negative number is imaginary. So now you have square root of 7 over square root of 6. You cannot leave that there, so we need to rationalize the denominator by multiplying numerator and denominator by square root of 6. So finally, x equals 3 plus or minus I. 7 times 6 is 42. And you cannot simplify that radical, so just leave it like that. Over 6. Why is it over 6? Square root of 6 times square root of 6. That is square root of 36. and square root of 36 is 6. And we can just leave it like that. Example 26, we have a trinomial here. Okay, I'm going to solve this by factoring because the leading coefficient is just 1. I can just factor this mentally. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 14, same two numbers that add up to negative 9. So negative, negative, 2 times 7 is 14. Negative 2 minus 7 is negative 9. Now we have our two factors. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Add 2 to both sides. Add 7 to both sides. $27. Oh, another one. That is easy. So solve by factoring again. I will factor this mentally. I know they'll both be positive because the one in the middle is positive and that is positive. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 plus 3 is 6. If you chose to do the diamond, that's fine too. 9 goes here, 6 goes there. And then 3 and 3. But you don't need this. You can just do it mentally. Okay, set each factor equal to 0. And just because they're the same, you don't have to do it twice. We already know the answer will come out to be the same. So minus 3 on both sides, x equals negative 3. Last one. You can choose to do 28 by factoring or by taking the square root. I'm going to do both. If you don't want to do both, just choose one and go with it. So I'll add 49 to both sides. Divide by 9. Take the square root. Remember, there's a plus or minus, and you're taking the square root of the whole thing. You're taking the square root of 49, and you're taking the square root of 9. And then you just need to simplify that. X equals plus or minus. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 9 is 3. All right, so if you chose to do this one by square root, there's that. If you chose to do by factoring, that's fine too. Here is what you would do. So they're both perfect squares. So, and there's a difference right there. So difference of two squares. So you take the square root of the first one, take the square root of the second one. One is positive, one is negative. The square root of 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 49 is 7. Here you have your two factors. So set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Minus 7 on both sides. Divide by 3. That's one answer. Plus 7 on both sides. Divide by 3. Here's your other answer. So either way, you end up with the same answer. Plus or minus 7 over 3. One is positive, one is negative. That's exactly what that means. Goodbye.